Let's read the verse at the top, Romans 1:20. It's centered in an italicized at the very top. Let's read it together. Ready, go. For the invisible things of him, both his eternal power and divine characteristics, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being perceived by the things made, so that they would be without excuse. Okay. And I have 15 minutes, Carlos, is that right? 20? Okay. The title of this week is The Power and Characteristics of God Manifested in His Outward and Physical Creation. And I have never been assigned an outline like this before. It is very interesting. I was realizing that the name Jesus is not in this outline anywhere. Christ is, but it's very high level, you could say, high level outline. And I almost would like to ask you, like, do you need, well, like, doesn't everyone here already believe in God? Right? So to a degree, it's like, why do we need this? Why do we need these verses that explain how creation testifies concerning God's power and his characteristics? Like, we already know that. And maybe, like, for many of us, like, do you really believe in God because of creation? Or is it more like something happened to you that is a kind of anchor point in your history, or more than once, right? That at least right then, God was very real to you, right? So it's all true. It can all be true. It's not like you have to pick. But I was just considering this outline has all these points about God's manifestation, and I have some feeling about how it really can be applied to us. But let's just go through it real quick. Roman numeral 1 says, the universe is the manifestation and declaration of God's glory. Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night tells out knowledge. So this verse, the one before, a few more that we'll read, what they're basically saying is the universe that we're in, that we inhabit, is not neutral. It is constantly saying something. And you know what it's saying? It's basically saying, God, all the time. When the sun rises, the sun sets, when you breathe in oxygen, when light hits you, when the sun hits you, those are things that happen to every person, hopefully. But also what's happening is, God. It's just, that's what it says. The heavens are declaring the glory of God. But there's a huge, I don't know what the right word is to use, conspiracy against this to deny it. Why? Well, the clue why is in Romans 1:20. The very last words of Romans 1:20 say, if you acknowledge that the universe is giving you this testimony about God's power, God's existence, then a consequence of there being a God is that you have to answer to that God. You're accountable. If there's a God, there may be a judgment. There may be some reckoning. There may be an encounter with that God, right? So the easy way to suppress that reality is to basically do this. So the universe is constantly saying, what? Say it. Yeah, that's right. The whole universe is always just going, God. Or maybe it's God. But anyway, it's God. And everyone is doing this. Nope. Why? So I'll have an excuse, right? So that my life, I mean, come on. You can't hold me to any standard. I mean, we're just cells, random, and so you can have this like nihilist attitude about everything. Anyways, I'm fascinated by this. 2, the abundance of light in the universe shows that light is a divine characteristic, a divine attribute of the divine nature. Good verses here about light. I might come back to one. Roman numeral 3 says, the wonder of the universe with the arrangement and movement of the stars and the distinction of the four seasons manifests how wonderful God is. Christ, as the embodiment of God, is the wonder in the entire universe. Thus, he, along with every item of what he is wonderful, incomprehensible, and mysterious. So, yeah, the temperature that the Earth is, the distance from the sun, the orbit. I mean, you may have read about like these things. If the amount of water we have, the mixture in the atmosphere of oxygen, these other gases, the moon, the tides, like this. If any of that was off, we probably wouldn't be here, right? So it testifies to God's very detailed and intimate care and even love, right? Aren't you glad we don't live on some desert planet? I'm glad. Some parts are desert here, but not much. Hey, what did you say? Did you say dune? Okay. I thought I heard you say that. All right. Yeah, that's fiction. So I read this one article. You know how some scientists are so desperate to find alien life and proof of it so they can have an excuse. And there was this equation where it took all these variables of water and gas and gravity and orbit and all the things that basically have to go right for there to be life, conditions suitable for life, whether there's life or not. But a lot of things have to line up, right? And so then they ran what's the percentage of this actually happening randomly when there's just, after the Big Bang? And then any of you who know statistics or combinatorics, when something is unlikely and you want to see if an unlikely thing corresponds with another unlikely thing and another unlikely thing, what do you have to do to find those odds? You have to multiply those things together. So if it's 1 in a million plus another, or with another 1 in a million, that's 1 in a, it's bigger than billion, okay? So anyways, and so you line up all these things, and anyways, they were like, even though there are hypothetically billions of planets, there's not one. The odds of one being able to sustain organic life are practically zero. It's really interesting. Some people tweak those things and say, no, there could be 10, right, in a billion. Anyways. Okay, number 4. The beauty of the universe, such as mornings and evenings, flowers, grass, and trees, mountains, rivers, and picturesque views, these and all the pleasant and inspiring scenery are manifestations of God's beauty. And 5. I'm going to get through this outline so I can try to apply it. 5. God's arrangement and preparation of the universe for mankind and his provision for man's every need show God's loving kindness toward men. And then here in Acts 14, Paul is preaching the gospel, and he's like, turn from these vain idols to the living God who made heaven and earth and the sea and all things in them. And then he says, he did good by giving you rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling your hearts with food and gladness. Okay. So when I read this, I was just thinking about faith, and how in my history with a little bit with myself, but also with many of my friends did not and still do not believe in God. It's a question mark for them. And I used to spend, especially when I was at Georgia Tech, I spent all this time just talking about it. Well, kind of like giving all these reasons why God's real, and then they would give their reasons why he's not real. Today, I don't think I would do that. Number one, because the whole universe is already saying what? God is already there. So I know that, and I have a lot more confidence in that now. But I've learned something about that what goes hand in hand with the testimony of the universe is the faith. This is not in the outline. This is like my addition. The faith that comes from hearing the word, right? So I learned through a lot of encounters that you can win an argument, but you lost the battle. You know what I mean? Like I could convince someone that, there's that, I don't know, that animals adapt over time to certain conditions, but they do not evolve into, I could have that argument and I might win it. Or I might talk about the origin of the earth or something. But that's not the same as being able to impart faith into someone. And faith comes through hearing the word of God. That's the point I want to make tonight. So if anyone knows what chapter of the Bible that's in, I will be proud of you. So what is that? What chapter says faith comes through hearing? Ephesians 10? Oh, Romans 10. It's like, man. Yeah, Romans 10. What verse? You cheated. No? Did you know? Oh, you looked it up. That's okay. That's not cheating, actually. That's being very resourceful. I knew a brother, and he was asked, would you rather lose your sight or your hearing? Who would rather lose their sight? Nobody, right? Right? Maybe if you're like really, really ugly, you'd be like, I'm tired of looking at myself. But that's a bad joke. Anyways, almost nobody would want to lose their sight, right? Like right away, I'm like, how can I do my work? I write software. I got to see. But they have little braille setups, but like that will never work. Nobody would say I'd rather lose my sight than my hearing. But this brother, who's quite, I would say, weighty in the Lord, he said, "Oh, I couldn't go on without the hearing of faith." In other words, to him, the hearing of faith, it's not called the seeing of faith. The hearing of faith was so valuable that luckily, he doesn't actually have to make that choice, but he was ready to make the choice to lose his eyes rather than his ears. I don't know, that really impacted me. So there's a thing in our Christian experience called the hearing of faith. And so with yourself, when your faith is at a low ebb, which can happen, right? Or with people that you're trying to lead them to discover reality in God. How do we do that? Well, sometimes it seems really cowardly to just quote verses at people, and not meet them on a scientific basis because that's where they're coming from. Well, I would just say this. Faith comes through hearing the word of Christ. And what I've experienced is you can talk about all those other things, but when you are able with an exercised spirit, that doesn't mean you shout at anybody, but if you're able to just speak something of the word into another person, you don't know what that will do. And I've seen this happen with some really, some really argumentative, intelligent people. And it was like, what's your response, Phil? And I'm like, my response is, this is the message which we've heard from him and announced to you. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. That's my response. Not like, ha, but you just are able to speak something of the word. I'm telling you, this is the way to impart faith into others, is with the word. So on the gospel, we want to meet people. I always try to talk to my son. My kids always say, when you go out of the house, you become a very different person, in public. And we don't like that, because I'll just talk to people in the checkout line and just because I'm an introvert. I hate that. So I try to fight against it. But I'm always trying to establish rapport, but I'm like, I've got to put in one phrase, one verse. So when I lived in Caldwell, I don't even know if that dorm is still there, but there used to be a dorm there called Caldwell. There was a guy in my hall. He was raised Catholic, but he was an atheist at that point. And I would talk, he knew that I was into the Lord a little bit. And so he's like, I don't believe any of it. I just don't believe any of it. It's just like you have this New Testament. It's just other people's mail. You're just reading, it's mostly letters, right? He's like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, and I went to some more experienced brothers and I was like, how can I get my friend Michael to believe that the Lord rose from the dead? He doesn't believe it. He believes that Jesus was real, historical. Of course he was. He's like, but he doesn't believe in the resurrection. What can I say to convince him? And the brothers were really wise. And they said, well, why don't you just read the verses about the Lord's resurrection with him? And I was like, that ain't going to do squat. We already talked about, like, he needs some kind of like logical, But I did it anyway. I got together and I was like, Michael, let's just read about it. Okay, you can just read what it says. And we read through. And I was at the end, I was like, so what do you think? And he's like, he literally said this, well, he did rise from the dead, didn't he? Just like that. And I just thought, well, yes, he did. But anyways, pick up this one point tonight. Faith comes through hearing. And even these, in addition to the testimony of the physical creation, we have to learn this lesson. What about if your faith is low? This is something I learned even to a greater degree, is like, sometimes when you feel depleted or things are happening that make you kind of go like, you want to what? Read the Bible, right? That's a good tactic. I'll read the Bible and then I'll feel better. Okay? But faith doesn't come through reading. I mean, it does, you know what I mean? But that verse, that's not what it's about. Faith doesn't come through reading. It's really interesting. Although it does a little bit. But like, have you ever practiced just reading out loud so that you have the experience of hearing? It's quite different. Read the Bible to yourself. I know a brother, he was almost annoying because every time he read the Bible, he read it out loud. So we all had to read it with him, And but I appreciated what he was doing. Sometimes when I'm in the car, I'll just take a verse and I'm just like, God is light. God is light. God is light. And in him is no darkness at all. And but if you're by yourself, you can be really wild. At all, no dark, and I'm telling you, just something is just so real and living and fresh when you do that. As opposed to like, how we most of the time are. You have to learn the secret. Faith comes through hearing. You got to learn. Don't be imprisoned by your personality, please. I met, Carlos isn't even in here. I don't know why he left, but I met him like 30 years ago and 27 years ago. And I was at this Bible school straight out of here, like this like computer science guy who never saw the sun and only had 3 friends. That's not true, but just like I just had a very narrow existence and kind of socially awkward, And I went to this Bible school, and I remember I was just like in my box. I love the Lord a lot, but I was just very imprisoned in my like personality and disposition. And Carlos was assigned to sit next to me, and they called some song, and I was like, And I remember Carlos next to me, and he turned, and he was like this, just like singing into my face. And I was like, bro, like, what are you doing? Stop it. And it was like incredibly uncomfortable, because I just wasn't, that's not my jam at all. And I had to but the Lord was really real, and I went home and the Lord was like, do you want to be a prisoner here of all places? Like, you came here to touch the Lord and you're just in your way, your personality. So over time I got some help, a lot of help. I'm still a little bit stiff, but I was telling Notnell, I was in Ethiopia 3 years ago, and we were singing, and all of a sudden this really amazing thing happened at the end of the song. You know what? It's called, I don't know, ululation or something? It's this. What is it called, Notnell? I'm not sure. Okay. For you, it's just like life. But for me, it was something. They were all singing. Da, 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 and I was like, and then all of a sudden about 1,000 people went, it was like the crescendo of the song. And they raised their hands like we were out on the savannah or something. And I was like, whoa, But the thing that made me so proud, not proud, but delighted, was I could enter into it. whereas the Phil from 25 years ago would have ran out of that room so fast. Anyways, what does that have to do with this? Nothing. Okay, my point is, you may not make that much noise in your Christian experience by yourself, but if you're in your car or you're alone, you can preach the gospel to yourself. And you can increase your own faith just by being vocal with the Word of God. And for sure with other people. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have tonight. Is that good enough? And preach the gospel to yourself. Amen.